Hey guys, what's up? What's going on? This is Mike coming at you via the crisp, sweet audiophile quality sound of the Apple headphones, because my audio interface is out for repairs. So first and foremost, this is the last episode that will drop before the holiday, so Merry Christmas. I hope you guys finally get that pony you were asking for, and I hope you take care of it because it's a real living thing that can die if you're not careful. So yeah, happy holidays. Let me keep it brief this week because I've got things to do, and I'm sure you do too, like listening to the rest of this episode. Goldfingers, you know the deal by now. It's our brand new data-driven Oscar prediction video series available on our YouTube channel. We've got 2 episodes out so far. I'm literally working on the 3rd one as soon as I'm done recording this intro, and that will include predictions for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, all the big ones. So make sure you're subscribed to see when it drops. I was hoping to have it released by the time this episode came out, but then the audio interface went kaput, and nobody wants to listen to my voice through the headphone mic for 20 minutes. Anyway, hopefully next week. So, to subscribe, search How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up on YouTube, or find a direct link on our website, howmanyfingerspodcast.com. Alright, this week Joe and I are reviewing Green Book, which actually turned out to be kind of a sweet Christmas movie. So let's get to that. Merry Christmas to all. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Joe.
And I'm Mike.
And you're listening to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, the podcast. And this week we'll be reviewing Green Book.
I sure hope the Oscars don't forget about it.
Welcome to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, featuring 2 guys getting milk and reviewing movies in a weekly podcast form.
And Mike Bohr left that for us via Facebook.
Oh, thank you so much, Mike Bohr, for that
Thank you,
suggestion and that sly dig at my personal beverage choices.
Honestly, shout out to Mike Bohr, because he's a student right now.
Getting us that Adobe for $10 a month.
Oh my god, it's like $15 a month.
Even
Adobe,
still.
come at me. No, I'm just kidding. We used to pay $52 a month.
Technically we still are.
I mean, yeah, but we're coming through with that.
Thanks for continuing your education.
Right,
Bohr.
yeah.
All so that we could get this student discount. I hope it was worth it. All right. Yeah, if you have any more synonym suggestions, like Mike Bohr, you can suggest those on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, email, Tumblr, anywhere. Get in touch with us. All right. Let's drink.
Yeah, Mike, what are we drinking this week?
We're drinking the $9.99 6-pack that I found at ShopRite.
Very cool.
This is Southern Tier Brewing Company's Old Man Winter Ale, a seasonal. So let's check this out. I've had stuff from them that I've enjoyed before. I think they're the one that do. Pretty sure they do one of my favorite pumpkin beers, the Warlock pumpkin beer.
We've definitely had this on the podcast before.
This?
No.
Warlock,
We've had Southern Tier.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I brought Warlock on the podcast before.
I don't know if I'm just pushing it on this beer, but it tastes kind of like spearmint-y.
I can see that, yeah. Whether that's accurate or not, I don't know. But I'm on the same wavelength you are.
Yeah. No. Hey guys, it's the 3rd episode of the night, baby. We've been drinking for it's
1:22 a.m.
All right. So let's get into the IMDb description. A working-class Italian-American bouncer becomes a driver of an African-American classical pianist. God. We were just talking about how gross and annoying this podcast must be with burping. But again, beer is carbonated. Okay. And
Take 2.
A working class Italian American bouncer becomes a driver of an African American classical pianist on a tour of venues through the 1960s American South.
All right, thank God for...
What a weirdly, I don't know, worded sentence.
Yeah, it was a little clunky, as IMDb descriptions are wont to be. Thank God for Control-Z undo, because I apparently deleted all the notes that I took. And I was like, well, let me just Control-Z for a little bit, and voila, they're back. All right, so...
I'm glad they're back.
Mike notes for Green Book. Directed by Peter Farrelly of the Farrelly Brothers directing duo, who have previously worked on Dumb and Dumber, There's Something About Mary, Me, Myself, and Irene, Osmosis Jones, Shallow Hal, Stuck on You, Fever Pitch, The Heartbreak Kid, Hall Pass, and segments from literally my least favorite movie of all time, movie 43. I don't know if you ever saw that. That was like that weird jumbled together sketch comedy movie that had a bunch of, like, Hugh Jackman was in it, Kate Winslet. They just brought a bunch of big name actors together. It looked like a lot of fun to shoot, but not a lot of fun to watch, and literally the worst movie I've ever seen.
I remember you were reporting back on it, and I was like,
I'm still mad about it.
There's no need to see that. Mike seems pretty angry about this film.
I will take that to my grave. Yeah, so they're kind of the directors of a certain type of movie.
Oh, most definitely.
So this is kind of a break from that pattern for him to be directing without his other brother, who I forget the name of. Something Farrelly, obviously.
Okay.
I believe you. Probably last name
You don't gotta
Farrelly.
sell me anymore. If they're brothers, yeah, like I believe they got the last name and shit.
Green Book was written by Nick Vallelonga, Brian Hayes Curry, and Peter Farrelly. Nick is the son of the main character of this movie, Tony Vallelonga. He's an actor, director, writer, producer with a ton of credits to his name and nothing really notable. So he's kind of been grinding away in the industry for a while. And then Brian Hayes Curry is an actor who has acted in like little bit parts in many of Peter's films. And previously wrote 2 Tickets to Paradise, but again, nothing really notable to his name. And then just this little bit from the press tour that we've been sort of laughing about.
Boy.
While promoting the film at a panel on November 7th, Viggo Mortensen caused controversy when he used the full N-word while comparing dialogue that's no longer common in conversation to the period the film is set. The next day, Mortensen responded by saying, "Although my intention was to speak strongly against racism, I have no right to even imagine the hurt that is caused by hearing that word in any context, especially from a white man. I do not use the word in private or in public. I am very sorry that I did use the full word last night and will not utter it again." There's just something sad but very hilarious about a white dude on the press tour for a movie
Like
that
this,
a
right.
movie that has this really positive message about racism, just dropping the N-word.
Oh boy. I remember Mahershala Ali saying he was deeply hurt by Viggo Mortensen saying this word.
Because he's someone who believes that it's not a word that anybody should be using
Yes.
of any background.
So
That it's a word that we should just put in the past, besides depictions in film. And whatnot.
yikes.
Yeah.
That's the wrong co-star to use that word with then. My gosh. What a nightmare. That's literally, we're not laughing at that word or anything. We're just laughing at kind of
It's the
fucking-
one thing that Viggo Mortensen should not say
Oh my
on the
God.
press tour for this movie.
it's like making a movie about
His agents and PR representatives
yeah.
have to be like, oh my God.
it's about filming it's like the equivalent of making a movie about a baby dying and then killing a baby on your
Yeah.
press tour
think
in
the-
front of people. It's crazy.
It was a controversy for half a day. It fizzled out really quickly. I think the thing that saved him is that legitimately in the answer he was giving, he was talking about, oh, you shouldn't say.
You shouldn't say. You're right, yes.
And he just happened to say it. So like his heart was in the right place. It was just, you know, you got to be more careful than that.
Well, I mean, I think that speaks volumes. I don't know. We've just seen other people say that word in other, you know, like even like YouTube or just other platforms, kind of like. I don't want to use this as like an example, and I didn't think of this before we started talking about this, but like PewDiePie or something, who's the most popular person on the platform of YouTube when he was live streaming. He's live streaming PUBG, Player Underground. I don't know what the full game title is.
Unknown Battleground.
Yeah, Unknown Battleground. We used to play it all the time. I should really know it. But he used it kind of as like a curse. Like he was like, oh, darn it.
That N-word. Yeah,
You're right, yeah. And I think the offensive part of hearing something like that was just kind of like, oh, that sounded too comfortable, kind of. It was just kind of, and I feel like you can kind of place that in this too, where it was just kind of like, wow, that came out of your mouth way too.
Yeah.
You know, like if you were able to say that stage or if you were able to say that word freely on stage, kind of like, God, like how do you use that in private? And I think that's what he's trying to get on top of and be like, hey, listen.
I don't use that word in private or in public.
Yep. Yeah.
Except you do.
Oh my God. I hope you don't use that word in public.
But I mean, like,
you just.
I don't even mean this to be like an apologist for his actions at all, but just like I happen to have a tiny bit of background on it. But like when I was younger, I was homeschooled, and we were homeschooled at this, like we used to go to like a co-op group where like you could bring your homeschooled kids to get like art and music and education that your parents probably aren't specialized in to homeschool you in. And there was a family that we were homeschooled alongside that was an African American family, and the matriarch, the mother of this family, was like best friends with Viggo Mortensen. Like, and this was like while like the Lord of the Rings were coming out. So I don't think that he's someone who has like racist feelings in his heart,
right,
you know, at least not to like a crazy degree. But it just seems like just a stupid slip up. That it's funny that it happened, but it's also like a hurtful thing to say, and it's just like you got to be more careful than that, Viggo. Like.
Yeah, and I think there, again, I don't want to harp too much on the humorous side of what is a very unfortunate slip-up, kind of, but I think there was a tweet, I think, that you brought to my attention that was kind of like, you know, I think Viggo Mortensen might be hearing a different N-word this Oscar season. Nominated, you know, like, it was just like, oh man, like, I don't think that's going to slow the Oscar nomination train down.
Yeah.
I think it
was hardly a controversy. It was literally like half a day. Like,
right.
It wasn't even like a full Twitter, like film Twitter, like, you know, scenario.
Which is crazy, but
yeah.
This is the world we live in, or just this is just the circumstances we operate under.
But anyway, let's get into Green Book, the film itself. I guess the only other sort of context we can set for this is just that this is it's very early at the time we're recording this. By the time this comes out, the Golden Globe nominations might already be out. Okay. Maybe even the Screen Actors Guild. I have to look at when this is dropping in relation to that. But where we are right now, with none of the like real precursor awards being announced, shout out to Goldfingers. Check out our Oscar prediction data-driven video series on YouTube, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But this is a front runner where we stand right now. Maybe not front runner, but a major contender, like in like the top three of guessing of what's going to be nominated and what would eventually win if what we're correct about what gets nominated. So just to set the stage for this movie, there's a lot of kind of like hype about this movie going into it, and we're kind of looking at it through that lens. I guess I mean we can start with like the first scene, which I think is like kind of impressive coming from like Peter Farrelly directing this movie. Like it feels like something that could have been out of like Goodfellas or something like that. Like they didn't go with the like, you know, sort of cliche like following someone, you know, follow shot that like Scorsese does a lot of the time. But I feel like they like fully bring us into the atmosphere of like the Copacabana in like the 1960s, and like it was very reminiscent for me of like scenes in Marvelous Miss Maisel, which is on Amazon, which is a pretty cool show for its first season, but they have a bunch of scenes in the Copacabana in that in sort of like a similar time period,
Right.
and it's very reminiscent in that way. I don't know, I just like this first scene a lot. Like I felt like it really brought me into the world that we're living in, introduced us to a couple of the characters, did it in this way that felt like even though this is like later on like a pretty contained production, like it's just two guys in a car for most of it and occasionally playing shows or at a hotel room, this felt like something sort of worthy of like an Oscar contender.
Most
This, like,
definitely.
first scene.
Yeah. I mean, this the Tony
Lip.
Lip, you know, he has two sons, and we God, we get such little screen time from them,
Yeah.
and I really don't care about that. I mean, this is written by one of his sons too,
Yeah.
and I think he has the knowledge of just being like,
I don't matter to this story.
oh, most definitely, and it's not also. He also doesn't have like, I don't know, like even though that is important and that has been instilled in his son, like through, like it's obvious that it has been through the screenplay, that it's just kind of like, oh hey, racism's bad, you know, like kind of like that doesn't need to be a scene in this movie or whatever. I'm glad we can kind of get a lot of just kind of his father's life
Yeah.
in this. I don't know, because you get a lot of context through this first scene. It is a gorgeous first scene. I don't know, it's great. It reminds me kind of like Mad Men or something. Or just, I love like these these old-timey kind of, I don't know. I mean, what?
There's like a lot of coverage in here that is like could easily go unnoticed, but it's just great. You know, like you have like the shot of like the one guy like buying a pack of cigarettes from someone walking by. Like it sets the stage
The
for
cigarette girls,
being in this like 60s. I mean, like Copacabana was like the biggest like coolest club you could like go to in New York at that time. Like it's a big part of the Marvelous Miss Maisel series is like her whole thing is like, oh, I want to perform at the Copacabana, and like that's probably going to be like the finale of like the series when that ends, is
Right.
getting to perform at the Copacabana.
And I love the performer that they have there, because he's not like exactly like some like Frank Sinatra guy either. He's just
Although he was, I thought I recognized his name.
yeah.
I don't know if that is actually someone famous or if it's just a really good
Oh yeah, I
60s
don't know.
sounding name.
Well,
I thought he was supposed to be someone notable.
I don't know, because he looks hesitant too. He looks like somebody who's kind of starting. Yeah, so I mean that could totally work with that. Yeah, no, I love this whole scene, and I love him just fucking like beating the shit out of somebody. I love
His whole like jig that he pulls with like the
hat and
with the
everything.
coat check girl.
right. It's
Good character building, because like the scene ends, we're like, all right, I know who Tony Lip is. Like he's doing what he can to get by, and he's also a reliable guy at the same time. Like he's pulling these like sort of like stunts that aren't really hurting anybody, but he's getting to make some money out of them.
He's this Matt. God, it again. I'm going to struggle with this later in the film, because I'm just like, I don't know if this film I don't know if this film accomplishes what it sets out to film, or God, jeez.
Accomplished.
I'm like drunk at this point in the night. Yeah, no, I don't know if this film accomplishes what it sets out to accomplish, but it does, however, kind of like mash all of these themes that I usually really enjoy, including kind of like this Italian culture, like Sopranos-esque kind of like with this kind of like Mad Men-esque like era, even though it's a little before Mad Men, right? What era is this? This is like the
19.
This is earlier.
It doesn't say specifically here. I feel like I saw 1962 at some point.
All right.
Mad Men starts in the 60s and eventually ends up in the 70s, right?
Yeah. This is 60s. It feels a little earlier, but yeah, it's about the same thing as Mad Men. It's same time as Mad Men. But yeah, let's dive deeper into it. And I fucking love... I just have like a soft spot for like fucking New York, and I started to become like teary-eyed when he was like writing a letter to his wife, kind of, you know, who lives in the fucking, where do they live in New York? Like the fucking Bronx or something?
Yeah, Queens or something.
Yeah, like Queens,
they probably
Bronx.
said it at some point.
Whatever, but it's crazy.
They're all New York to me.
To just be like this close to immigration, kind of, where it's very like small number, like generation, and then like when he's like kind of like exploring deeper into America, to be like, you wouldn't believe how beautiful this country is, kind of, and that makes me teary-eyed. Like it's just kind of like, I mean, like, let's even talk about before going into this movie. Did you have your reservations about this movie?
I thought it was actually a good trailer.
Okay.
But just the concept of it just seemed kind of like, okay, like we've made this joke in our friend group before, like reverse driving Miss Daisy.
That's
like,
all I could think about. And it's, I mean, even after the film, it's all I could think about.
Yeah. I don't know. I was slightly reserved. I mean, I'm always at this point just kind of like cautious about anything that's like, oh, this is the contender for Best Picture, unless the trailer like really floors me, you know. So I was a little cautious going into this, but I didn't expect it to stink or anything like that, because I did think it was a decent trailer. I was like, I definitely want to see this. I don't know if I believe that this is potentially the best picture of the year.
Yeah, I think this was one of those films where I was presented, I think I kind of was presented like a concept more before I was presented a trailer. So I hated the concept a lot more than I hated the trailer.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think I took a lot away from the trailer either. I was just kind of like, okay, like,
Looks
I
like
guess
a good time.
let's see this. It honestly hasn't had a big like campaign either. I haven't seen a lot of trailers or commercials or anything for this film at all. I mean, I don't even really. How did this even do in the box office?
I think it did okay because I think it opened.
Right. Okay.
I mean, again, like it's a technically a drama. Like I guess you could call it a dramedy maybe, because it's a little bit on the lighter side. Like I don't think anyone was expecting it to like blow the doors off anywhere. The budget was $23 million. It was just kind of them shooting in a car for a lot of it. And I think pretty sure it opened. All right, so it opened 2 weeks ago. I don't know if that was wide. So far, it's made like 11.3 million back. So I think it probably just went wide last week. But I think they were projecting it was going to make like between 6 to 8 million this past weekend, or the weekend that we're in right now. So like, it's going to make its money back eventually.
Okay.
I think with movies like this, I don't think anyone makes them being like sadly, no one makes these movies just to make money off of them, or like they make these movies being like, all right, well, what gives us Oscar potential, and then we'll make money if it does well at the Oscars. kind of on the kickback for that.
But yeah, I think I had a lot of reservations about this movie going into it because of the kind of controversy with the N-word that we talked about. Kind of going into this, I was just I kind of wanted it to fail. Yeah, I'm curious just because I've heard from somebody else who had a similar experience to me. But what was your theater experience like?
I'm trying to remember. I don't think it was anything significant.
Okay, so I
I saw this
right.
Wednesday night at, I think I went to a 10, like after 10 p.m. showing in the middle of the week. So there wasn't a lot of people in there. Not a very interactive audience. So not really much of an experience.
I think I saw it on Tuesday because I think even you were just like, I don't know how much longer this movie's going to be in theaters.
I was like, I have to see this Wednesday or it won't be around.
Right. Because, yeah.
At least I think AMC was just dropping it because something else was coming in.
Oh, right. I mean, this is a really popular season for movies. I mean, we're in December now when we're reviewing this. But yeah, I had to go to a different AMC theater just because my AMC theater is smaller and it plays just popular movies. But anyway, I went in there and it was on a Tuesday, and AMC does like $5 Tuesdays, so I don't know if like that's why it was packed. But like it was such a positive theater experience where everyone laughed the whole time. People clapped and applauded and said things, and I don't know. It was just kind of like I finished the movie, and even if I wasn't like a believer totally of this movie, I was just kind of like, God damn it. Like I wouldn't care if this movie was like a Best Picture nominee, which I mean,
you could do a lot worse.
Which is rumored is because it feels like a movie of the people, kind of. It was just kind of like they laughed at all the right times, and they kind of, fought for, the bad things that happened to this character or whatever. I don't know. It seems like a movie of the people. Again, I'll kind of return to this near the end and be like, kind of racism doesn't end with a kind of happy ending. This is a package with a bow tie on it, and I don't think racism ends like that, really. But I don't know.
We'll talk about that when we talk about that. I have some things to say about that.
This is feel good.
Yeah.
This is feel good, and it made me feel good, and I particularly really love the ending of this movie, kind of, and I think
it's kind of a Christmas movie.
It is. It's a Christmas movie, but again,
I'll be home for Christmas.
It's also one of those things that wears off after a while, and I had a 40-minute drive back from this movie, and I was just kind of like, by the time I got home, I was kind of like, I don't know if that can carry me through. It's just kind of like, it was like a really nice feeling at the end of the movie, but by the time you get home, it's just kind of like, I don't know.
I kind of feel like I have the opposite experience where like while I was watching it, I was kind of nitpicking some of the stuff. And then the ending is just so positive that like, that's really all I can think of when I think of the movie as a whole. It's just kind of like, yeah, it was really good. It made me feel really good. I felt warm and toasty inside. And, and it's not even like it's like a huge ship. Like my nitpicking with it was very minor to begin with. Like it was definitely a positive experience watching the movie. But I mean, let's get into like the nitty gritty of it. So like we're introduced to this Tony Lip Vallelonga character, and then we are introduced to like his family, and he's got what's her face? No, I'm too slow. I was gonna make a Freaks and Geeks joke, but I can't remember her character's name in that movie. Linda Cardellini.
Yeah.
Lindsay Weir.
Yeah,
There we
Lindsay
go.
Weir.
Would have been a better joke if I thought of that 2 seconds ago. And that's his wife. And we're introduced to like the rest of his family. And there's this kind of like awkward moment. And I kind of wish they would have like directly followed up on this moment. Like, I mean, I guess they kind of do symbolically, but just directly with the imagery of this first moment later on. But like, Tony like wakes up from his like night of, you know, bouncing at the Copacabana the night before, and like everyone's
Works
in
the
his
night
house.
shift, right?
Yeah. And like his like father-in-law is like, you know, you go to like sleep while like you have like strange men here helping out like your wife. And he turns and there's 2 African Americans that are working on like the, I guess they wouldn't have a dishwasher back then, but working on, I guess they were doing the floor. They do say that later on. The redoing the floor because it was moldy.
Plumbing
in the
of
kitchen.
some sort.
I think it was the floor. They said the floor, the kitchen floor was moldy. And they're all speaking in Italian and saying this kind of like racist shit about these 2 African American men.
They refer to them as eggplants, I believe.
Yeah.
Which I didn't even know was like a
I don't
kind
know
of
where that comes from.
slur. That sounds like a very Italian thing to say about African Americans. Yeah, I'm totally unfamiliar with that from any sort of. Yeah.
And then she gives them 2 like glasses of water or lemonade or something, and they drink out of it. And then the glasses are like in the sink, and like Viggo Mortensen's character keeps looking at them, and then eventually he goes over and just picks them up and throws them in the trash. And it's like it's a very like I'm for it, because going into this movie I thought it was going to be like The Help 2. I guess that was probably my negative reaction that I did have to the trailer. That I'm thinking back on it was that I thought it was going to be like Viggo Mortensen is the one man in the 60s who doesn't see color, and it's just kind of like, because that's how the trailer kind of makes, they don't show any of the negative sides of that character in the trailer. Like he's just kind of someone who's like, yeah, you need help down in the South, and like you're gonna have a tough time, and like they're showing all the positives of him sort of coming around to the Don Shirley character. And I thought it was gonna be like The Help, where like Emma Stone's character in that is just kind of like, yeah, why is all this stuff going on here in the South in the 60s, like just completely oblivious to the upbringing that everyone else has had. Like I thought it was going to be similar to that, and I was kind of refreshed to see that like, oh, this is going to be like a more complicated movie. Like it isn't just going to be those are the bad guys and these are the good guys. Like our protagonist is kind of a shithead in the beginning. Like he's got this really disgusting view on race where I can't even drink out of the same glasses, and I won't let my family drink out of the same glasses that 2 African American men have drank out of. Like I've got to throw them in the garbage.
I feel like there's not a huge follow-up with that.
That's my problem, is that like I like that they brought that there, but I thought that should have come full circle at the end. Like I mean again,
kind of just goes from that to just fine.
Yeah. I mean they do have the scene where then when he has like the interview with Don Shirley, because like after his night at the Copacabana, someone's like, oh, we know this guy who needs a driver, you know, and you need a job because the Copacabana is closing for a couple months for renovations. And he interviews with the Mahershala Ali character, Don Shirley. And like in that interview, like it doesn't go so well. And then he like sort of like raises his rate to be like, you know, I'm not going to like wash your clothes. I'm not going to shine your shoes. Like you're going to
be about there, right?
Yeah, you're going to pay me 125 instead of 100 if you want me. And he's like, or you can go like hire that. And he says a slur for Asian Americans.
Right.
And yeah, so like he says some like kind of like disgusting stuff in this, and like I appreciate the movie being willing to be that honest about, like especially like Nick Vallelonga willing to be that honest about his father in this script, and not just be like, oh yeah, and he was always this perfect guy who was like, what's the deal with racism? Like why are you guys treating other races different? Like it just it feels refreshing to have a movie from this time period where there's not some like white savior that's coming in and it's like, what's going on here? Like he, you know, he was a product of the times, and he had these just disgusting racist views, and it ends up making the ending of the movie more powerful that he sort of is able to turn that on his head, you know. Mm-hmm. Even if we don't necessarily look at him and be like, oh, he was a great guy. Like, it's nice to watch a movie sort of about a conversion moment, I guess, is my point. I feel like I started that point out trying to get to somewhere else, and I don't remember where I was going. It's gone now.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, they kind of start. I was kind of excited by the idea of him throwing out these kind of lemonade glasses and his wife kind of being annoyed by that. Because I was like, oh, maybe this is some like weird hang up she has like about him kind of. But then that never really makes an appearance again. I never really in this movie saw like this kind of like learning experience where I was just kind of like, oh, I don't know, maybe it's fine to like kind of share something. Like you just have to. I mean, honestly, you have to be in a super ignorant place to be like, oh God, these two black men drank from these two cups in my house. God, I have to throw them out. To kind of be working a job with a black man or African American man and just be fine, kind of just being like, oh, you know, we share everything in this. And I didn't see...
But I think that's part of... That is what the movie is trying to get across.
Okay.
Is that it's this sort of shift, this transition period where, like, America's going through this conversion moment where, like, we went from, like, you know... obviously like the like deep hatred and like awfulness of, you know, slavery, and then the Jim Crow era and all this other stuff, and then it was like, you know, obviously things aren't even great today, but to get to where we are today we had to go through this sort of also equally disgusting transition period where it was like, oh no, like I don't hate black people, but they can't talk to my daughter and they can't drink out of the same stuff and they can't try on the same suit in a store, you know. It was like that sort of like separate but equal era where it was like, yeah, they're equal, but they got to go to that water fountain instead of our fountain. And I think that's sort of a central theme to this movie because, yeah, again, like they have that scene with like him throwing the glasses out. They also have the scene that I was mentioning earlier where he goes into the suit store to buy the one suit in the one town, and the one guy is like, yeah, no, like, you can't try this suit on. Like, you can buy it. I'll sell it to you perfectly fine. Like, it's this view of racism that's not like, oh, like, get out of here. We don't serve your kind here. But it's like, but keep your stuff separate. Like, it's still a disgusting type of racism. And it's this sort of conversion of America where we haven't fully gotten to treating them like equals yet, even though we're claiming to treat them like equals. Because we'll sell to them, but you can't try on the same suit that I'm going to wear, and you can't eat in the same dining room that I'm going to eat in.
And I understand that. Just as like America, a country, kind of, but I never saw that kind of progression or evolution as a character from Tony Lip. You know, he kind of went from one extreme to another, and I don't think I saw any growth between those 2 points. You know, it was just kind of like, God, even if his washed saliva on a cup touched anybody in my family, well, geez, I could never deal with that, to kind of just sharing a car and working as his boss and sticking up for him, like, you know, putting his neck out for like this guy. I didn't see the evolution of Tony Lip. It was just kind of like, I don't know, a job's a job, you know, where it's just kind of like, yeah, well, these guys who came into your house, the job's a job. It was just, I didn't totally see. There wasn't a connection. There wasn't a connection between how he felt in the beginning and how he felt in the end. Like, I would have loved like a little bit of progress. Like, I
think it was. Maybe I'm just not explaining that point properly. I think it is there because I think it's trying to express this type of like middle way racism where you don't think you're being racist. Okay. You know, where like you're like, oh, the type of person who's like, yeah, I've got black friends, like that's all fine. But like, we're not going to drink from the same glasses and all that stuff. We're like, yeah, I think if you asked Tony Lip, you know, pre the Green Book movie, He would say, "Oh, I'm not a racist," you know, like I've got
Almost
I work with
definitely.
I think he even says it at one point, like I work with a bunch of, you know, whatever.
Here's my idea of the perfect movie. His friends or his father says like, "Oh, you let, you know, some, you know, the African American slang or whatever, like, you take care of your wife, whatever, drink your lemonade or whatever, put their saliva on your glassware or whatever." And then he's like, and then his father or his friends or whatever say, throw that glassware out. You don't want that contaminated for your wife or children. And Tony Lip kind of is like, oh, okay. Like, you know, for you guys, I have to throw this out, kind of. And then at the end, when Mahershala Ali comes to the door, instead of like being like, oh, you know, like you can come in and have a drink or whatever, but then you gotta leave, you know, like it just invite him like fully just in, like completely embracing him. It was just like that could have been the transition, but instead it went from this like weird kind of like Viggo Mortensen kind of throwing these glasses out in private, and we never get like another private moment with him where he's just kind of like, I just don't trust them, you know, or just like I just don't trust their saliva. I don't know. I can't put my mind in
It's
like
tough. It's a tough thing. But that's what I think the key is, that is like it's a movie where America is transitioning from outward racism to sort of eliminating the outward racism. Obviously, we don't see the full transition of that in the movie, but it's depicting that time period. But I think that the transition for Lip is that he's transitioning from being someone who outwardly would say, I'm not racist.
Okay.
But inwardly has those racist feelings. That's why it's not something that like his family's like, throw those glasses out. It's something he does on his own.
Right.
But then through this sort of conversion moment that he has, again, that's why I just wish they would have had a scene where he literally gave a glass to Mahershala Ali at the end to just be like, okay, that transition was there.
Right.
And, you know, unfortunately it had to take place because he had to get to know one himself and become friends with someone in order to be like, oh, like, you know, I don't have to throw the glasses out after an African American touches them.
There's just nothing that I wish there was something that happened on the road that was like that Mahershala Ali was like.
Well, that's the thing, is that I think it's harder to show. I guess maybe you want something neater to happen on the road that connects to that, like him sharing a glass with Mahershala on the road, or
yeah, maybe even something.
Because I think the road is just supposed to be that. Well, again, it's a conversion moment, so he's getting to know Dr. Shirley, you know, and like the road is the transition from them being these sort of like odd couple that is literally at odds with each other to connecting, where like you finally have the scene where after he like stands up for him at the YMCA, they like share a whiskey together, or I guess scotch technically, because it's probably his Cuddy Stark, in the hotel lobby, and like are talking to each other like, you know, kind of like equals, rather than Don Shirley talking down to Tony Lip as this sort of uneducated bruiser type guy.
I guess I wanted something where, I don't know, there's something like very like, you know, like these men drink out of my glasses and their saliva is on that, and that is a different, like a subhuman thing that is existing on my glasses, kind of. And I wanted, I don't know, especially somebody like Tony Lip, who's like just fucking will eat anything and drink anything. I wanted some sort of hesitation of just kind of like, oh, like Mahershala Ali's like leftovers or whatever, or he's just kind of like.
I think the transition is supposed to be
okay.
Like when they have the final like dining rooms again. I think the work takes place in him becoming friends with Dr. Shirley and seeing him as a person, and this sort of transition happens in his heart where, you know, he was never really a outward racist, but he had these inner racist thoughts that we're seeing in these private moments, and then he's sort of erasing that inner racist, or as best as anyone can,
Right.
Erasing those sort of inner racist tendencies. But I think when they have that like final dining room scene where at the final show of the tour, and like Dr. Shirley needs to play every show of the tour in order for Tony Lip to get paid, which I think is I'm hoping that's true, but it's a great device either way in the script of, he needs to play every single show. But like Tony Lip like standing up for him in the dining room place, and then Dr. Shirley kind of like leaving it up to like Tony Lip, like, what do you want to do? Like, and Tony Lip's like, yeah, let's get out of here. And basically blows like the last half of the money he was going to make by not playing that show, so that Dr. Shirley can sort of have his dignity by not, going to eat somewhere else and still playing the show. Like, I think that is supposed to be Tony Lip being like, yeah, it does matter. And it's stupid that he's not allowed to eat in the same dining room, which it's supposed to be, I guess, sort of the connection back to drinking from the same glassware, because that's sort of the dining room's view on it, is they can't use the same silverware and setting places and be in the same room as our white guests and whatnot. So I think that is sort of a connection that I kind of just honestly made now as we were discussing.
Oh, right. No,
this whole thing.
I still wish there was something a little more
neater.
Like, God, that seemed like when he threw those glasses out, it seemed like such a personal attack on his family that I wish there was something later in the film that was just like, oh man, like I have to share something with somebody of this different race, and God, they're just another human, and it's not gonna kill me, to I don't know, drink out of a...
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that would have been too neat or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. Because they was like just... listening to Peter Farrelly was on the Director's Cut podcast for this, which is a really great episode because he's just a funny dude because his life has been in like comedy movies and whatnot. And he was interviewed by Dan Gilroy, who did Nightcrawler, and then Roman J. Israel, who's a pretty good interviewer too. It was a good episode of the podcast. Definitely recommend listening to it. But he was talking about how like he was drawn to this script because it was like, for the most part, like all true. Like they played around with the timeline of some stuff.
Right.
But he said the ending was 100% all true. Like the tour ended with them coming home for Christmas. He said the only thing that's sort of left out is that they went back out on the road and they were basically touring for a full year. So it wasn't like the thing was just done at Christmas.
Right.
But there was the whole like rush to get home for Christmas and him inviting him over for Christmas dinner and stuff like that. But he was saying that he wasn't trying to make a movie that was like a message or a movie that was like trying to end racism. He was just drawn to the script because it was this true story of this fucking racist New York bouncer who drove this like great pianist around the Deep South, and they became friends, and the guy sort of like, it's just like a crazy story that turned out to be true. And I think if I view the movie from that lens, I appreciate it more, where it's not like, the movie's not trying to end racism. It's not even trying to necessarily have a message about racism. It's just a movie about a story in which racism exists.
Right.
And the movie is more just this odd couple friendship, and isn't it fucking weird that worked out that way?
Yeah. And I mean, again, I think, I don't know where, Widows Falls 2 episodes before this, correct?
One episode. Last week was Widows. Okay. Week before that was Fantastic Beasts.
Again, I'm kind of viewing this through Oscar lenses, where it is kind of like, oh yeah, no, that would be a sweet story, but it's just kind of also like, I don't know. It wants, this movie also wants so much more out of what it actually is. Kind of like it wants to exist so much more in its kind of just like, look at it, like, isn't it like look, white people, like isn't racism stupid? Like, you know, like it's, I don't know. It just, like, it rubbed me the wrong way in a lot of places during this film. I don't know. And I think the Tony Lip transition and journey and everything, even though it was, I'm sure it was difficult, it was a little too easy too. For sure. And it's also, it kind of sucks too that this isn't one of those films where it's kind of like, oh, well, they're both the main character. They're not. I think Mahershala Ali is obviously the supporting character. We really don't get anything from his point of view. I mean, I would have loved, like, one those kind of, like, Southern thugs want to beat the shit out of him, kind of. I would have loved to see, like, what happened up until then. I would have loved to see, like, oh man, like, God, like, what's it like for somebody like that to kind of endure a situation like that, before Tony Lip shows up. I don't know. It's a hard. It's like a cool story, but it's a really hard story to tell in 2018, man. It's like a really.
That was one thing that I said when we were just watching the trailer before we had seen it. You had kept saying that, like, this seems like a movie from, like, the 90s. And that was sort of what I said coming out of the movie, is like, I think that criticism that you had is accurate, but I think that's why the movie kind of works. Like, it is just kind of like, it absolutely feels like a movie that would have been made in the 90s, like, again, being directed by Peter Farrelly, being this sort of like road trip movie, which feels like kind of like a dead genre at this point in time, very much like a 90s thing. But I think that's why it kind of works, because it is just sort of this simple story and this simple setting, and like I don't think the movie tries to do too much. Like it just keeps everything simple. It's just like a solid movie. Like, there's not a whole lot that I can really like pick at where I'm like, oh, this like stinks. Like, anything that I really have a complaint with is like either like viewing it through like the extreme Oscar lens, or I
mean, that's what I have.
Some of the stuff that's a little too earnest, maybe. Like, I think my biggest complaint is like, so like they have like the one encounter with like the police down in like Alabama or something, and it like goes awful, and he says some stuff and makes Viggo Mortensen punch him, and they end up getting thrown in jail, and they won't give him their call, and just like, awful racist cop stuff. And then when they're driving back home for Christmas, they get stopped by a cop again in the snow, and this cop comes over and is like, oh, I'm pulling you over, blah, blah, and it ends up just being that like their back tire was whatever, and he ends up helping them change it. And then it's like, like, drive safe, Merry Christmas. Like, and it just seemed like something that was thrown in there to be like, not all cops are bad. And it's just kind of like, it's not really the message you need to throw in there. Like, we have plenty of movies about
all lives matter.
We have plenty of movies about good cops. Like, we don't need to show that cops are good sometimes in a movie that's in 1960s, like Deep South. Like, the movie would have been fine without that. But again, I think when you view this movie through the lens of not being a movie that's trying to have a message about racism, that just happens to be a movie that takes place in a society and about a story that includes racism, like, I think if you look at it through that lens, then that scene kind of makes sense, because that scene is more just kind of like, it's trying to play off of that earlier scene and just be sort of what they thought was going to be an obstacle on their like trek to get home, and it's sort of the movie turning on itself, where like things haven't been going right, and now things are finally going right as they're sort of winding down towards the end of the movie. Like, it kind of makes sense to me through that lens. So it's sort of like a half complaint that I have, where I'm like, you probably just shouldn't have done it. You should probably be wiser than to throw a Blue Lives Matter like
Oh, yeah, definitely.
scene into a movie that is obviously, you know, whether you want it to be about racism or not, racism is an aspect of this. Like I could definitely do with that scene, but I wouldn't let it like tank my opinion of the film, because I can sort of find a forgiveness for it.
See, my whole thing is, you know, I feel like we judged Widows pretty harshly, and it was just kind of like this heist movie and so or whatever. I don't know, and this film really leans hard on that kind of like racism kind of card, and I think there are so many more movies this year that tackled racism in such a complex matter. Like, I mean, even Black Klansman kind of, which we kind of tore apart. Or Sorry to Bother You, and, you know, The Hate That You Give. And I think even just like movies and, you know, even period pieces, I think sometimes, I don't know, we're just like a little more sensitive to race than this movie. It was a weird movie.
How did you feel that it was insensitive to race?
I think, okay. I mean, when we first meet, I mean, Tony Lip is kind of, you know, we don't really even, this is a side note, we don't even really explore kind of the white on white racism during this era in this movie. We do briefly touch on it.
In the first cop encounter, yeah.
Right, yeah, in the first cop encounter. But we really don't kind of touch on that. But there's something, I don't know. There's a lot of things where it's just kind of like, it's kind of trying to like make us be on the side of Tony Lip, kind of, where it's just kind of like, oh, like Mahershala Ali, he sits on a throne and he kind of dresses like Eddie Murphy, you know, in what was that film called? I don't know exactly what it's, I forget what that fucking movie's called, but you know, he's in like kind of like garb and everything. Yeah. It's just kind of like, my God, how could you be on this guy's side? Like, he's a fucking like so full of himself, kind of like, it's a weird kind of, it presents a weird form of racism when he first is hired, and it's kind of like weird, like, oh man, I'm a white guy being hired by a black guy, but like also we have a sense of understanding where it's just kind of like, oh man, I'm fucking Tony Lip. It's just kind of like everybody in my theater wanted like that kind of like humor to continue, where it's just kind of like, I don't know, if somebody's acting out of order, I just fucking beat the shit out of them. I beat their fucking face in, kind of. And Mahershala Ali kind of has to be like this kind of like buzzkill who's kind of like, we can't fucking do things like that. Mm-hmm. We can't just fucking, you know, throw the cup out the window. We can't, you know, we have to pronounce the way that we speak in public. We have to kind of, I don't know, it kind of puts the audience to Tony Lip in the beginning of this film. Mm-hmm. And it's a little weird and it's a little racist. I kind of think it's just kind of like, oh, I don't know, this guy I want to work for, he's a doctor and he fucking sits on a throne and he wears the fucking African garbs and like all this like kind of weird stuff that puts us on Tony Lip's side. And I thought that it was just a weird juxtaposition. And I don't know if that's the right word, but it was just like a kind of strange kind of, I don't think I would have noticed it if I didn't see it with such an enthusiastic audience who was just kind of like, fuck Mahershala Ali, you know, kind of like, it was kind of like a dangerous thing that they were doing with it just kind of like the end of the film, where it was just kind of like, it made a whole bunch of white people feel really great about racism. Like, people left and were just kind of like, I don't know, like, it's not all that bad. The black guy got to spend Christmas with a white family. It was just, it was
I
really...
can see it being the type of movie where the inner workings of it and the message does kind of get lost. Where, like,
It's just kind of, yeah.
if you're not viewing the movie carefully, like, yeah, you can watch the beginning of this movie and be like, Tony Lip's a cool fucking guy. And maybe if you're not as sensitive to some of that stuff, like, you don't I really cringed when he threw those glasses in the
Almost
trash
definitely,
can. And I
right.
really cringed when he said the C word in the interview, where I was like, are we supposed to like this guy? Like, I'm not really on his side right now.
But the thing
And
is...
if you're not being careful about that, yeah,
But the thing
audience
is,
could...
modern racism, I think, like, modern racist will throw out, like, they would be like, oh, I don't agree with throwing out cups, you know, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just, like, I don't think that's, like, that, I don't know.
Well, yeah, because I mean, everything is shrinking more and more
Right, yes.
inward, and yeah, there's people that will watch this movie and
I'm not that guy.
yeah,
Exactly.
and not
oh my god,
not recognize their own
if
things.
if I had one black friend, I would have him in for Christmas.
Yeah.
And that's not racism doesn't like end there.
but
you
my,
know?
but
like,
my thing is that it's Peter Farrelly making this movie can't change the society that he's making this movie in.
Right.
And I don't think that it makes this less of a good movie to tell a story that I thought was touching and endearing,
right.
to like, and you know, kind of a little bit brave to tell a story about a protagonist who is kind of a piece of shit when it comes to race, and to show that there can be, because it is a true story of this guy who was like literally in the synopsis of describing this whole story. He's a racist. He's a racist who becomes friends with a African American that he was driving around in the Deep South. And
It's kind of like, how does that guy's son really tell a 50-50 story about the, you know, that black guy? He doesn't understand that guy's struggle.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like, I get that too. It's kind of like when that guy's being beat up in the bar and, you know, all those kind of like redneck thugs are beating the shit out of him. It's kind of like, Jesus, I don't know what happened until like my dad showed up, kind of thing.
I'm not even really faulting it for that. Like, it
Right,
can be
yeah.
Tony Lip's story. I'm just saying that, like, I don't think we can fault Peter Farrelly and the makers of this movie for not being able to control the way that audiences might take this movie. Because I think his intentions are honest, and I think he's trying to tell the story that A, is just interesting on the surface because it's a wacky fucking story, and B, I think that the real story of this is kind of like the elimination, or at least the attempt to overcome, like, inner racism. And, like, that's a positive message. Like, even if it's starting out with a shitty character, like, he does end up in a good place. And it sucks that he has to have a conversion moment, but that's the truth for most of America, is that they can't overcome these, you know, awkward, crappy tendencies that they have inside until they could put a face to it and be like, oh, like, those feelings that I have towards African Americans, there's a real person on the other side of that. And I don't think we can really we can fault the film or Peter Farrelly, because some audience members might watch it and be like, yeah, Tony Lip is cool the entire way through, and I really root for him over Mahershala. Like, I think the story is still, like, because it's not like, you know, Don Shirley has to change all that much in this movie. Like, he definitely has enough for there to be a character arc for him. But the story of the movie is Tony Lip, the racist, sort of overcoming some of his inner workings and tendencies to be able to forge this friendship with Don Shirley. So I do think he has to be the main character of this movie, and I don't think you can really fault Peter Farrelly for audiences relating too much and not being able to, like, analyze the movie properly and be like, oh, he's a piece of shit in the beginning, he's less of a piece of shit in the end, and
Right, definitely.
even if he says funny stuff throughout.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I just thought
I see what you mean.
The
It's just like-
positioning was weird.
I don't think
it's
I'm just saying I don't think it makes the movie insensitive
Oh,
to
no.
racism. Like, I
Yeah.
think the movie knows what's going on, but you can only do so much without putting like a disclaimer beforehand, like don't relate to Tony Lip in the beginning of this movie or whatever.
Right. But I think it obviously makes Tony Lip more relatable than Mahershala Ali's Don Shirley.
Right, but that
could ever be.
That is also the truth of the situation, and I also don't think that's a bad choice either, because you want, hopefully, like,
but these motherfuckers called the movie The Green Book, man. I don't think that's a great title, and I don't think. I don't know. I think this movie really wants to lean on racism, and I don't know. I don't know if this movie's like a great racism movie. You know what I mean? Like it's just kind of like this guy kind of I don't know. It's just I don't think it's the best example we could have. I think it's a great story to tell, but I don't think maybe it's the story to tell for this cause.
Well, again, that's what I'm saying, is that no one entered this movie being like, we're going to end racism, or this is a message movie. They thought it was an interesting story that they wanted to tell, and they were not going to shy away from it because of racism being involved in the movie.
Right.
Right? Like, that's all Peter Farrelly kept expressing in the director's cut was like, this is just a crazy fucking story, and like, I wasn't like setting out to be like, oh, I'm going to make a break from, directing all these like raunchy comedies, and now I'm just going to be a drama director who's going to direct like cause movies. Like, he's made like really insensitive movies in the past.
Right.
He was just making this movie because he was like, there's an interesting story here, and I like telling interesting stories.
Maybe the studio's at fault then.
Well, I mean, they're definitely going to market it that way because they want to get the Oscar push.
I mean,
now
but
that it's
just
made.
Even like the way that the movie's cut though. Like, like it's not just kind of, it's not a comedy anymore. When the neighborhood fucking hillbilly rednecks want to beat up this guy because he's black, or the police want to, show a hard time to this guy because he's black and he's a homosexual, bisexual.
Well, what's the problem
orientation.
with that, though?
I think if you show enough of that and conversation and the glassware that has another race's saliva on it, and I think when a majority of the screen time has kind of this kind of racism attached to it, I think the genre shifts from something that this director has previously done, comedy, where a majority of the screen time has taken place with comedy, where all of a sudden, my gosh, a lot of these scenes are really touching on racism and not as much comedy. And I think comedy is kind of this comedic relief in this film. Yeah. I think you take on maybe this responsibility in a film that's majority of the scenes take on racism. I don't know. And I think, especially...
But I don't understand how anything... It's not like he handled anything irresponsibly in the movie, I don't think.
Well, I think the irresponsible thing was the Tony Lip kind of being... Hey, I'm the reasonable guy, I'm the fucking comedic relief, and you're the fucking smutch kind of like telling me to do like... like to not be, I don't know. I think it projects the audience to be on the side of Tony Lip and to be against Dr. Don Shirley.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm on your side.
Okay.
Because I just think
That's
for
fine,
a traditional movie structure, you want to have like one protagonist. And then like I think for a story like this to work, like one of them has to, for it to be like the odd couple story, one of them has to be like the one that we're at least sort of relating to, or at least following, and then the other one has to be sort of the more ridiculous one, and then there's sort of everything intertwines, and you're like, oh, they're both kind of ridiculous in their own way, and Don Shirley's more relatable than we thought. And like, I think in the end of the movie, we probably relate to Don Shirley more, like, and we actually start following him more towards the end. Like, we definitely have, you know, the personal scenes with Tony and his family, but then towards the end, like, you know, when they get home for Christmas, like, we have the scenes of Don Shirley at home by himself and sitting in his throne and, you know, feeling lonely and feeling like he hasn't really gotten whatever. We do also have the scene of him in like the courtyard of the one hotel. Like, we don't get him what happens at the bar, but we do have like what drives him to the bar from the prior scene of that. I don't know. I don't really see a problem with that. I don't really know how the movie could work with like focusing on Don Shirley starting out, like, because he's the, like, Tony Lip is like the everyday man. Don Shirley is this like rich, famous like musician. Like, he would have to be the sort of one that we're being introduced to through Tony Lip. I don't know. I don't see how the movie would work with like Don Shirley being the main character when he lives this life that nobody can really relate to.
Yeah. And no, I totally agree with that. But maybe, I don't know, maybe that's why I don't see a reason for this film being made in a way. I don't know. It's just weird. This film kind of being like from the, I don't know. I wouldn't make this film from the Don Shirley point of view, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think I just see that from a different perspective, because I feel like, again, it's not Peter Farrelly's responsibility to hold the audience's hand and be like, if we're going to do this the right way and we're going to do this from the Tony Lip view, then this is how you have to understand Tony Lip. Like, if the audience is not going to get offended by the things that Tony Lip does in the first half of the movie, and not understand that he's someone that is going to go on this journey, not someone to like root for in the beginning of the movie. Like, that's not his fault. Like, the audience at a certain point, like, this film can't solve racism. If someone's going to come in here and see these things and not recognize it as like a dog whistle type thing, then you know, that's not his fault. Like, he can still make this movie for people like us who are smart enough to watch it. Like, if you're not watching this movie and being like, Tony Lip, hell yeah, like, if you're smart enough to watch this and be like, yeah, Tony Lip's a piece of shit, but he undergoes this transition, then, I mean, that should be fine.
I mean, but
because, again, I don't think anything's handled irresponsibly. He puts all the evidence out there. He has all these acts that Tony Lip does that are shitty things to do.
But, like, again,
and he obviously he can't make him a total piece of shit, because there does have to be this transition. And at the end of the movie, we do have to be like, okay, Tony got to a point where we can sort of respect him. Or at least he's closer to where we feel now.
Again, but then, like, is this movie just for people who understand that? Like, it's just kind of like, God, how many films can we make for just kind of like white people who are just like, hey, racism's bad. You know, like, it was just kind of like.
But I don't understand. I don't even know what the solution that you would imagine for that would be. Like,
I think that the film industry that we live in now is just kind of like, I think that a production, like a studio, sees like kind of Oscar potential in this. And I don't think there's actually any potential in people getting any sort of value out of this movie. I think I personally don't think there's any sort of value that people can kind of get out of this movie that like they don't.
Moral that value, they don't, you mean, or like
correct? Yeah, moral value.
So no one's getting changed by this.
Right?
Movie.
Yeah. There's nothing really getting changed out of this movie, and I think maybe the studio only kind of promotes this movie because I think a way to present themselves to the Academy kind of again, which is a means to getting sort of a more monetary value, you know, in the end, just because it's, oh my God, it's an Oscar nominee. I don't know. I don't see anything in this movie really that's of kind of moral value that can kind of translate to this kind of, I don't know, like this monetary value. Like,
that's what I don't get. Where like if
Okay.
the creators of the movie aren't setting out to make a moral movie, if they're just telling this story,
right.
and this is the way to tell the story, and then
Right.
they put out like an entertaining product,
Mm-hmm.
like then I don't understand where the disconnect is happening, or where the fault lies.
I guess maybe that there's
Like, is your
just,
problem that you didn't like the movie, or that you didn't agree with the message, or that the message didn't get across, or there
No,
shouldn't have been a message?
I mean,
or...
I think I came across genuinely liking this movie, and I think I'm
from an entertainment
yes,
standpoint.
and I think I'm kind of remorseful about that because I feel like this kind of white fuck who's just kind of like, God, I just got enjoyment out of this movie that's kind of, I don't know, it's the way that it ends is just kind of like, I don't know.
No, I see what you're saying. I want you to not feel that way, because I think, like, again, if you like view everything through like the viewpoint of like Peter Farrelly, like this is not someone who's trying to push some like
Most definitely.
some super
Most
like
definitely.
leftist
Right.
agenda, and I think like our like super PC, super leftist like, you know, mindset that we're coming to in like 2018 makes us want to look at this movie and be like, it's a little too earnest, it's a little trying too hard, when in reality it's a true fucking story. And I don't think we have to feel guilty about enjoying a story of someone's personal conversion moment, where like it's a small victory that this guy, who at one point was just a straight up racist, can have this lifelong friendship, like until like they were both alive until like 2013 or something like
Right,
that.
right,
Like
right, yeah.
a lifelong friendship with this guy. Like there's nothing that I don't think we have to feel guilty about in that. Like there's nothing try hard about that being a true story and then telling the story of that.
Here's my struggle.
Especially if it was entertaining. Like it's not like they
Oh, most
tried
definitely,
to
right, yeah.
they tried to glean some, you know, weak entertainment out of some try hard moral story. If it can be both at the same time, like I don't understand what we would have to feel weird about enjoying it.
I think me feeling weird about it is perhaps kind of the concept that we talked about last episode, where we said we were seeing something through, you know, Oscar kind of glasses, kind of. And I think we hold a higher standard to something like that. And I don't think this movie kind of fell to like this higher standard for me. And I think maybe I was kind of, I don't know, I was kind of tricked at first by kind of the content of this film. I don't know. I think like, yeah, this movie's like an okay film. I think like I can compare it to, you know, I was out to dinner. I talked about this the other night, and somebody was like, "Oh, I love Ryan Reynolds. He's so hot and he's attractive, and I love him. He's like a cute guy." And like to the point where they were like, "Oh man, I can't wait to see him in Detective Pikachu." Like that's crazy. And I was like, "Hey, let me swoop in and say, have you ever seen Just Friends?" It's a great movie. And like,
And Ryan Reynolds is in it.
yeah, no, and Ryan Reynolds is in that, and I think I was able to swoop in there and say that. And I think maybe like the reason I also like Ryan Reynolds is like it's kind of, or Just Friends, the film, is that it this Christmas film, and I think, you know, it's also not nominated for an Oscar, which I'm assuming this film will eventually be. I think this film will actually be nominated for an Oscar, and I don't think like I don't know. I think just because we can kind of generate that feeling from that angle, I don't know, I have to treat this almost as...
No, like I sort of get your feeling, I think, just to a lesser degree.
Okay, yeah.
Like, as we're sort of, we should be at least trying to start winding
let's wind it down.
Winding this down. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is among my favorite movies of the year, but it feels weird to say that. Mm-hmm. It's hard because, like, I don't have a whole lot of complaints with this. Like, I levied, like, my biggest one, like, being that good cop scene at the end. Like, even though it made me feel good, I was like, I don't know, that kind of feels like maybe you couldn't get old replica police cars unless you put a good cop scene in there, you know? Because I know that shit happens all the time in the movie industry. Like,
no,
you know, they literally won't lend you the props unless you put something positive about the police in there. And then, like, obviously the stuff with the glasses in the beginning not coming just solidly full circle, even though, you know, he does welcome Mahershala Ali into his home. Let me just go on like a quick tangent that I haven't touched on before, where I really didn't like. This is probably my like second or third biggest complaint. Where, like, in the beginning of the movie, in that like glasses scene, like, you know, he's doing his own like private form of racism, but like his like brother, or I guess it's his brother-in-law, and his whole family are being like outwardly racist, like saying things to him out loud, like, you know, I mean, they're doing it in Italian, admittedly, but, you know, they're saying these like disgusting things. And then at the end, when like Dr. Shirley comes in, and like Tony's like, oh, like, this is Dr. Shirley, and there's like that kind of like awkward pause, and then like his like brother-in-law is the one that's like, well, what are you doing? Like, come on in, get him a fucking plate or whatever. And it's like he's like his brother, we obviously didn't have a conversion moment for, or like an hour and a half of like, you know, getting to know this person, and that felt a little unearned for him to just be like, well, if he's good enough for Tony, he's good enough for me, even though I called him all these like racist slurs like in the first scene and like only other really scene you saw me in this movie. Like, that felt really weird. Like, right. I can understand like Tony obviously inviting him in, but his brother-in-law just being like, yeah, sure, now I'll be like super total welcoming, even though I was just rude to like the other white guy that we invited in before. Like, you would have thought he would at least be like breaking Dr. Shirley's balls or something. Mm-hmm. Like, it felt weird. But what was I getting at? Oh, just with like all the, something about my complaints. I'm trying to regather my train of thought that I was on before.
We love to get into one specific point
and then talk about it the entire movie. We haven't even really talked about anything. I was talking about the movie overall, so I guess we were winding down. I'm totally losing it. Yeah, I don't know. It's probably not coming back now. I think I was just talking about that, like, even with like my few complaints, like this was like a very enjoyable movie for me. But I think it's just because it's just kind of so solid all around. There's nothing that really blows me away in this movie. Like, even as highly as I talk about like the Copacabana scene, like, you know, I'm not even gonna like really put that up there as like my top scenes of the year. It's just solid. Everything in this movie is pretty solid, and I have, you know, a few complaints that I've levied already. But it still feels kind of weird to be like, yeah, this is like the top like 3 or 4 movies that came out this year that I've seen so far, and is probably going to be nominated in the top 10, you know, at the Oscars for Best Picture. Like, as positively as I feel about this movie, that still just kind of feels weird.
Oh, most definitely.
Because again, nothing really blows me away about it. It was just solid and really enjoyable.
Right, yeah.
I think that was just the only point I was getting at. Was that just I sort of echo your sentiments to a lesser degree of being like, it's weird that this is going to be at the Oscars. Like,
right. It just, yeah.
Like, looking at it, like if it was just a movie that you saw in theaters, you'd be like, man, that was really fucking good. Like, had a good time. You should all go see Green Book. But then when you look at it through the lens of the Oscars, you're like, Best Picture?
Right. No.
Even if technically it deserves it, because I don't know what else is really better, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like,
And I think that descends from, I mean, when we do a review like Widows, when I say, my God, like, does a police on African American violence scene belong in this film, kind of thing? And it's just kind of like, my God, does that escalate its position in, you know, being nominated for Best Picture? Like, you know, where's the correlation between, you know, what's happening politically and what's happening in the Oscars and everything? And it's like, this is a good film. My God, my computer's going nuts. Yeah, it's one of those things, and it's just a really weird and awkward kind of conversation. I mean, especially for two white guys. Yeah, but I mean, honestly, I love the end of this film. I would have hated it if it ended on something where, like, the, you know, where the trope where it was supposed to be like kind of like the bad cop who was kind of like, sorry boys, you guys both gotta go to jail because you're a Guinea, you know, and you're an African American, get in jail, you two, kind of. And instead of kind of like, you guys have a flat tire, kind of. And I don't know, I think Viggo Mortensen does a good job. He is incredibly charming. Unlike, did you ever see what is the other film? Something Fantastic?
Oh, no, yeah, I know what you're talking about, but
where he's the father of however many children.
It might just be Mr.
Fantastic. He's okay in that film. I think, was he up for Best Actor?
For that, I think he was up for Eastern Promises.
Really?
I could be completely wrong.
I don't know. I just remember.
Quick way to find it. Oh God, his Wikipedia picture is so funny.
Is it just him mid saying the N-word?
It just looks like a total like hippie dude.
I mean, I think that's why he was promising in Something Fantastic.
Yep. He received his second Best Actor nomination for Captain Fantastic. So
see, I don't think he was...
I guess his first one was probably for Lord of the Rings, maybe.
See, I don't actually think he was that great in Captain Fantastic. He's just kind of this dad who doesn't want his children. He's very, I will raise philosopher kings. You know, just very bullshit like that kind of. And it's not even really a great film.
No, Eastern Promise is what he was nominated for.
He does hang dong in Captain Fantastic.
Oh, nice. Dad dong?
Dad dong. I don't even know what the context is.
Just homeschooling his kids.
He's homeschooling his kids, and for some reason, he has to show his penis in that movie. I think this is a more appropriate film than Captain Fantastic for him to be nominated for Best Actor. Is the fucking basis of what I was talking about for the last fucking 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah, I feel, again, there's so much weird about this year where I'm kind of like, yeah, it was a pretty solid performance. I didn't feel like I was blown away by it. Nothing was bad about his performance at all. I know he put on like 50 pounds for the role and was really invested in it. And Peter Farrelly was saying that it was like a really collaborative experience with him and Mahershala Ali, where like they were, as they were getting more into the characters, they were like affecting more and more about the script and the directorial choices, just kind of all three of them working together to be like, what would these characters really do?
And I love both of their performances.
Yeah.
So much.
And again, even Mahershala Ali is just very solid. It doesn't blow me away, but he's just a fantastic actor that he can just really
Oh no,
slip in.
he's not just like, oh, I'm the guy from Moonlight.
Yeah.
You know, he's fantastic. He's transformative.
I think this is a really solid, like a subtly solid script.
This is a really
like despite having like 3 people with
I'm
their
actually
their
not
hands in the
crazy
kitchen.
about this script.
Well, here's the defense I'm going to make for it. It's just that, like, I think it's subtle. Like, I don't think you like listen to like dialogue scenes in this script and be like, man, like the poetry is just beautiful of the language.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that, like, I think like the ending being as effective as it is evidence of how good this script actually is. Where like you have a scene where Don Shirley, or rather, when Tony Lip is driving and he's like, I can't keep my eyes open, like, I think we got to call it. Like, I'll just pull over at the next spot. And then we cut to the next scene and we discover that Don Shirley is the one driving. Like, and that ends up being like, I think that was probably the closest I came to crying in this movie, was just the reveal of Don Shirley being the one that drove. Like, and that's because of how well the script sets up Don Shirley's character as like being like, I don't drive. I sit in the back seat and I put like a blanket over my lap, and it just his character is so well established that there didn't even need to be any dialogue in that scene. We just needed to see his face driving and me be like, well, I'm gonna fucking lose it now, because that's how much their friendship means, is that he wants to get, you know, Tony Lip home for Christmas and stuff like that. Like, I think there's a lot of stuff like that in this script that's why I say it's a subtly effective script. Like, there's, you know, like they could play clips from it at the Oscars and you'd be like, okay, like it's not really, doesn't seem that great on the surface, but there's a lot of really effective stuff going on, I think, under the surface of this script. Yeah, we probably should wind this down and get into some ratings real quick.
Let's do it.
Bada bing, bada boom. On review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 82% based on 149 reviews, with an average rating of 7.9 out of 10. The website's critical consensus reads, Green Book takes audiences on a surprisingly smooth ride through potentially bumpy subject matter, fueled by Peter Farrelly's deft touch and a pair of well-matched leads. I can bang mine out real quick.
Do it.
I'm gonna give it a 4.
All right.
I think 4.5 is too high, because again, like, it's this really solid movie that I really have very few complaints with, but it just doesn't blow me away really anywhere. It just it entertains me. It doesn't underwhelm me anywhere. I think everything is just really solidly well done throughout. And it was just, it's just so weird that it like ends up being like one of like the top movies of the year. But like, I don't know, like I don't have a whole lot of like favorite scenes in the movie, or I'm not like touting any of the actors being like my favorite of the year or anything, or even the direction. It's just everyone showed up and cared at least about the movie.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like it was anyone's like absolute best potential put to work here. But yeah, I don't know. 4 sounds appropriate. 4.5 is too high. 3.5 is too low. It's among the best of the year. Maybe even like I think I might end up putting this like second or third on my like personal list for the year. Which is just kind of how weak this year has been. Which again, not really to say anything bad about this movie. There's not a whole lot that you can say negative about this movie. It's just, it's not overwhelming in any real aspect.
Right.
While also just secretly being one of the best movies of the year. So 4 fingers for me.
All right. Yeah. I mean, again, just friends. If it, you know,
Have you heard the good word?
if it came into theaters and I watched it, I think I would give it 5 fingers. I can't totally say that's true though, because I think I said something about this the other day where I was just kind of like, God, it's so easy to give films from past years Five Fingers. It's so easy to be like, oh, Social Network, Five Fingers.
It's hard
or
to just before we were reviewing stuff, like we weren't viewing anything through the eyes of like,
most definitely.
how do I rate this? And like, I mean, we've all got our own like metrics that we're going through of like,
My God, but
how many
like
strikes do I give against this movie? And
even
like there's Five Finger movies, quote unquote, from the past that I probably have some things that I would like levy as a complaint if we were reviewing it.
I think even like films that were released in 2017 that we can look back at now, or 2016 that we can look back at now that we maybe reviewed, I think maybe now we could maybe give Five Fingers. I don't know. But just
Yeah, I think if I watched them without the guys of the podcast,
right, yeah.
Something like Call Me by Your Name, if I wasn't
Right.
viewing this through the podcast lens, I probably would have been like, yeah, Five Finger movie. I loved every second of it.
Right. Again, I think there's an element of Christmas, and there's an element of not spending Christmas alone. I think there's something that was incredibly heartwarming about this film. I think there was something incredibly heartwarming about this film, and then just the idea of Christmas enhanced that as well, and it really got to me. Again, my audience reacted very positively to it. Again, I have my own hang-ups and my own complaints about it. And it's just one of those things where I was like, God, is there anything new that this film really brings to the table? No, not at all. I think it's a cool story that's like really well told, and I think there's like a lot of great performances in it. It's just kind of like, at the end of the day, it's just kind of like, yeah, it could have been like really well written. And it could have been like really well acted. It could have been really, really well directed. It could have been really well edited. But that still doesn't mean that, like, I don't know. It should have cultural significance. And I think that's maybe like what I was trying to get across.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting the Oscar hang up, is like,
before
you're putting this in like the halls of like film history, essentially.
Right. It's kind of like
something for an Oscar.
People 100 years from now might look back on this year and be like, oh, this is what mattered.
As like I'm going on like Letterboxd, I'm like going through and like rating all the films I've seen from each year, and I'll get to like, you know, years from like the 70s and 60s, and I'm like, oh, there's all these films I haven't seen. So then I'll go through and be like, well, what 5 films were nominated for Best Picture that year, and add all 5 to my watch list. And
right.
Yeah, it's weird to think that like in like 50 years from now, someone might be like, oh man, what was good in 2018?
Right.
Well, gotta add Green Book to my watch list.
Right. Yeah.
Or Widows, or
oh god, if somebody
A Star Is Born.
Yeah. So, I think I'm gonna put this at 3.5. Just because it's an above average film. I don't know, and I really felt this film. But again, to go into the territory of 4 is to say that it's of some sort of significance that I don't think it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's everything. Yeah.
So then it'll obviously come to 3.75 and round down to 3.5 fingers for Green Book. All right. Super late, way longer than we should have gone on this episode, so we'll get out real quick. As we've been saying all the past couple of weeks, check out episodes 1 and 2 of Goldfingers, our data-driven Oscar prediction video series, available now on our YouTube. You can find our YouTube by searching How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up on YouTube.com, or go to our website, howmanyfingerspodcast.com, and you'll find a direct link somewhere on there. And yeah, subscribe to our YouTube. Check out the first 2 episodes, and we got a couple more coming out. Episode 3 coming out probably a week or 2 after this comes out, and we'll be predicting Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, all the acting stuff, probably Best Director, a bunch of the major film awards we'll finally have predictions for. So maybe Green Book will be among them. You'll have to check it out and see, so make sure you subscribe to find out. And anything else you can find at howmanyfingerspodcast.com. Check out our review of Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald 2 weeks ago with Kevin Pettyjohn, and our review last week of Widows with Bill Herman. And our review next week of, I don't know.
We'll find out.
We got to figure out what next 3. It'll probably be determined by what wins at the Golden or what gets nominated at the Golden Globes. Coming up. All right. We're going to get out of here. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
That we will.
Rising vocal range?
Yep.
Getting higher and higher?
Yeah.